Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast, where we share career stories, strategies, and lessons learned on how industry leaders and influencers have built their personal brands. Now, let's get started with the show. Hi, everybody. It's Paula Edgar, host of Branding Room Only, and I'm excited today to be doing a special episode of the podcast featuring one of the people who has shaped my brand and had me become an influencer and influence my life. And I'm so excited to be talking to my father, Peter L. Griffith, on today's podcast. Daddy, introduce yourself to the Branding Room Only audience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Peter L. Griffith. I was born in Barbados. I came to the United States when I was 14 years old. And it's a long story. By the way, the book won't be out for a while, but
yeah, that'll be the next episode. So where did you come to when you got off of the plane from Barbados?
So coming into JFK, dressed up in a jacket and a tie and slacks, and looking out the window and seeing the swimming pools, because the plane, I guess, came over Long Island, and seeing the blue of the swimming pools and all the backyards and stuff, I was finally in America, the great country. And it was a wonderful sight. It didn't match the house that I ended up going to in what was then Ocean Hill, Brownsville. I think that was what it was called, on Chauncey Street, 634 Chauncey Street, to be exact. First thing that hit me was the smell of the house. It smelled, and I've never experienced a smell like that before, because it was different from what I expected. Oh, well, not what I expected, but what I was accustomed to in the Caribbean.
So just for the audience's sake, the address that just gave was in Brooklyn, which is, I think, the most important part of this, which is the best borough. You all know that I am not at all shy about the fact that I love Brooklyn and it's my favorite borough. And so growing up in Brooklyn as a teenager, you then went to high school in East New York.
No, I went to junior high school first.
Oh, right.
I've been to junior high school, IS 271, John M. Herkimer High School, John M. Coleman, I think, High School on Herkimer Street in Ocean Hill, Brownsville is what they called it then.
Okay. All right.
And then I graduated that from junior high, which was a horrendous experience for a Barbadian kid with a very thick accent, who was brought up in schools that required you to raise your hand when you wanted to speak, and you had to call the teachers sir and ma'am and stuff like that. And then go into a junior high school where it seemed like chaos because the kids were just wild. But it was a pretty horrific experience to me. Kids can be very mean, especially when you're different. And I was very different. So leaving junior high school was a dream. The kids were more civilized, and I met a lot of other kids who were from the West Indies also. And I no longer felt alone, because I felt very alone in junior high school, because the people, I guess, who were West Indian weren't identifying themselves as West Indian. But
interesting, because when you think about, and I always try to tie things back on the podcast to what your brand is, and to think about how popular the Caribbean experience is now versus back then, when it was, you were just in another group of immigrants that were coming into this country, and having an accent and being different was not necessarily cherished in the way it is now.
No, it wasn't, because the kids told me that we were taking their jobs.
Mm.
I, I didn't I didn't really understand that because my mother worked as a maid.
Hmm.
I, I didn't understand that at all. It is what it is.
Hmm.
Uh, it was difficult.
Okay, so then high school.
High school was, like I said, high school was a dream. In high school, I found myself in junior high school because I, I started to blossom as a student,
Hmm.
something I was not good at in Barbados. I was really, I would say that I was a C- student in Barbados.
Mm.
And I came into junior high school and found myself doing A work.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think they put me back a grade, which was the best thing they probably could have done for me.
Hmm.
And that, I mean, I was unbelievable in high school, in junior high school. And when I think about my experience in high school, it was wonderful. It was fun. After my first after my first semester, I had like 86 or 87, you know, average. And they asked me if I wanted to join a special program for kids that were doing well. And that's how I joined what was then called College Discovery.
Hmm.
And that was really an experience because that meant that I was then with kids who were really interested in learning all the time.
Hmm.
We had a couple of periods of math and English, and I think I did pretty well in high school. Only failed one class. And I blamed a young lady whose name is Jacqueline Isaacs. I don't know where she is now, but
Calling people's name out. That's
I'm sorry.
poor Jacqueline.
I blame her because we were sitting in the back of the class, and I talked to her a lot, and I failed the regions, but they could have passed me in the class, and they didn't. So that was the only class I failed in high school.
This is an interesting revelation because I definitely know that there was times when I was young where I was told that I should not be talking in the back of class
Yeah,
and I
well,
should be focusing, but that's a whole nother story. Talk about that in
yes.
therapy. Anyway, so so then as you progress through high school,
Mhm.
and the interesting piece about you saying that you were in this college discovery is that given what the Supreme Court has done recently, that probably would have been considered a program that was a pipeline program leading into college to bring
Ye
inner city
Yeah,
people of color.
yeah, yeah.
But that's, you know,
Basically it was. And
yeah.
it the interesting about it was that, they gave us a foundation, but the foundation was not good as because when I got to Brooklyn College, am I allowed to say Brooklyn College?
Of course you're allowed to say Brooklyn College. That's where
Okay.
you went.
When I when I got to Brooklyn College, I was totally overmatched because the the kids that the kids that were there knew a whole lot more about lots of different things that I didn't get it. I wasn't exposed to in high school. But, I dragged myself through college, and thankfully I graduated.
So, I mean, I
It
guess we
I
start.
mean, you must say with a degree in history, with a mind in education. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, relax. Anyway, so, 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 there was a milestone that we skipped, which is me
Uh, uh,
there. So everybody, a little preface for what you should and shouldn't do in high school is, is that in the meantime, in the between time, I was born. So
77
you don't have to
February.
talk about the years. Relax.
February 14th. Can I do that
There
then?
you go. There you go. Valentine's
Yeah.
baby.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
It was one of the best moments of my life. Best,
Aw,
yeah.
daddy. For those of you who have not sort of checked into my background or have even heard me talk about how I was raised, etc., that you you should know that I have my biological mother, obviously, who gave birth to me, was who we were talking about, who my father was with at that time in high school. And then we'll move on to talk about who raised me. And I think that's the crux of what I wanted to get to in terms of this story. So let's fast forward a little bit. So
Okay.
you then had a young child that you had to take care of, uh,
Yes.
and then you had to go to work.
My mother had told me that as long as I was in college, she would take care of me in terms of, what my needs. And all of a sudden, here I am with a pregnant girlfriend,
Mhm.
and I had to go to work. And that was a horrible experience. And I say horrible in terms of I should not have been working. I should have been just concentrating on school, but I had to go to work, and work was first worked in a factory. You just trying to find any job you can. I worked in a factory, which was horrible. And then I got a job working at a law firm as a clerk and a messenger and stuff like that. And that was I got to see a side of people who were different than me
Mhm.
and who looked down on me because of my color. The thing was that I was raised that you are not better than me.
Mhm.
And although they might have been lawyers, I didn't care.
Mhm.
I'm still Loretta's son.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Side note on that one, because I think about, again, bringing it back to branding and being better or not than other people, and thinking that way. I remember how important it was for my grandmother Loretta, who you just mentioned, that we dressed a certain way, right? And I that's been a straight line for the most part of my entire life, because I think that baton was also carried by mommy, and we're gonna get into talking her about her in a minute.
can I
Uh,
can I can I interrupt you and say this?
yeah, please.
My my mother Loretta.
Mhm.
It's interesting that somebody told me, looking at their pictures of the line,
Mhm.
you remind them so much of her and how she dressed.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, okay. But I mean, she made sure that you had um great clothes, and it was just amazing. But she did a lot in terms of helping to raise you,
Mhm.
obviously, because I couldn't provide for you the way that I would have liked to. And she really assisted in terms of making sure that you were well dressed and looking spectacular.
Yeah, obviously I was young because she's my grandma, but I was young, and I remember her doing 2 things. One, baking and cooking, and
Hmm.
the other one was, like, making sure that I looked like, I remember her, like, fixing me, and so I had the experience of that sort of Barbados side of my family when I was growing up. But it's interesting because, um, as I progressed later on, my Jamaican side, which both my biological mother and mommy, who we'll talk about in a minute, are both Jamaican, and so that is a very much huge part of the culture that I was cultured in,
Hmm.
uh, even though I only went to visit Jamaica when I turned 40. And so, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. So, okay,
Okay.
so now
Okay.
you work at a law firm, and again,
Yeah.
iron because your daughter's a lawyer.
Yeah.
They're not better than you now. Anyway,
It's funny that when I left high school, well, when you gave out the information in school about high school about what you wanted to be,
Mhm.
my high school yearbook said I wanted to be a lawyer.
Mm.
Um, It's something that I seriously considered, but you know, low expectations are a horrible thing to have.
Oof.
And, and I wanted that, but I didn't have a roadmap.
Mhm.
I didn't have somebody to explain to me what it was going to be like. And the difference in my life and yours is that you had me and mommy
Mhm.
who had a roadmap
Mhm.
and who say, these are the opportunities that could be available to you.
Mhm.
And I didn't. I needed it in a sense that mommy. And that's one of the reasons why you were poured into the way you were.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because especially the fact that you went to Deerfield, that was us pouring into ourselves in a sense, because we both would have liked to have had that kind of experience, which is why having you go there was such a proud moment for us. I mean, it killed me in terms of how much it cost, but I look back on it now. I look back on the bills that they sent asking for their money, but but I think the money was well spent. I mean, I could not have expected that you would become the person you were when you left Deerfield. Because of that, as I go to Deerfield and hear them talk about you, we would look at each other like, this Paula? Because we know what you were like at home, and you were not like that at Deerfield at all. You were unbelievable, and everybody seemed to love you, and they were like, "Oh, Paula is this, and Paula is it." The who you are now is who you were becoming at Deerfield. I mean, that's just blooming like, and I mean, just to see the woman that you were becoming.
Mhm.
I mean, he just absolutely loved that. Of course, I must say this, that our goal in life was to get you and Joanne out the house
Mhm.
so we could have the house to ourselves. But that's beside the point. Let's
Now I've been taking again that baton because we've got now my husband and we have one kid out and we wait for the other kid to get out. I mean, we love them so much.
yes.
Anyway, so you talked about, and we'll skip around a little bit, but we started talking about mommy, but we haven't said who mommy is,
Mhm.
and what I wanted to do is to kind of draw the like continual line as to you worked at the law firm, and then you worked where, and then where did you meet mommy?
Okay, so I worked at Merrill Lynch, which was then Maryland, Pierce, Fenner and Smith
Mhm,
in 100 Broadway
mhm,
in Manhattan.
mhm.
And you want to know how I met her?
Yes, but keep it for the public, please.
So, so I was, we, the way how it was, the office I worked in,
Mhm.
I could look down the hallway from where I was sitting and I could see into another office down there. And I saw her one day. And in fact, I actually saw her on the elevator and I was taken aback by, her obvious good looks and physical qualities.
You should have been a
And
politician anyway.
I think I am. Out. And I really, I mean, I liked her. She was just beaming. She was, there was just something about her.
Mhm. Yeah.
And a couple of days after I saw her, we were both coming out the number 5 train at Wall Street stop. And the Wall Street, no, whatever the stop was near Wall Street. And as we came through the turnstile, I saw her and I said, "Hi, how are you?" And she says, "Hi." I said, "I'm Peter from Barbados." And she said, "I'm Joan from Jamaica." It was like famous lines, Like, listen, I never said I was the smartest in the world, but I went out of my way and I spoke to her, and I guess we walked to work together, and that basically was it for the beginning of our relationship, talking to each other or whatever.
So fast forward a little bit more. So you both got married in
And
1980.
before I do this,
Yeah.
let me tell you what
Sure.
happened.
Okay.
Like, so I was seeing someone at the time,
Hmm.
okay, and who shall remain nameless.
Good.
And I had a date one night, and we used to work until 9 o'clock at night.
Hmm.
Just back then, there was a lot of overtime and stuff. And she worked late, and we saw each other in the hallway. And I said to her, "Would you like to go out to dinner?"
Hmm.
And she said, "Sure." So we went to a place called the China Chalet on Broadway,
Hmm.
and we sat down and we ate. And after that, we went over to Battery Park, and we walked around a little bit, And then I said, "Can I kiss you?"
Hmm.
And she said, "Yes." So we kissed, and I turned to her and I said, "I'm sure you could do better than that." That was like a 1 or a 2. It's
Oh God.
So she did better than that, and it was, from there we were seeing each other, a lot after that. So
Yeah. So fast forward, you get married,
yeah,
and you get married in 1981,
yes,
September 5th.
yes,
And at that point I was 3 or 4, 4.
yeah,
And so you didn't have a new wife,
Yes.
uh, and I wasn't living
No wife who was, I think
19.
she was 19. Yeah.
Yep, yes. So a new young wife,
Mhm. Yeah.
and and I wasn't living with you yet,
No.
and so a little bit after that, let's without going to all of the details, I then moved in with you both.
Yes.
So that must have been easy.
No, it wasn't. It was it was difficult because, you know, sh her expectation was that she would have her husband and she would enjoy,
Mhm,
you know, living without the thought of having a child anytime soon and, go out and party and stuff. Like, we weren't big party people, but, having the ability to go where you want or stuff like that was all done. For me,
mhm,
it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I say that because I wanted to raise you because I knew that you were special from when you were younger.
mhm,
You were very conscious of a lot of stuff. You
mhm.
were very smart. And I just wanted you, I just felt that I could do a good job of raising you and making you the best version of you possible.
Mhm, mhm.
Basically a mini me, but it's beside the point. Okay. I wanted to give you the education that I had, you know, there was something inside me about education.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
that was something that drove me. And I wanted to be able to give that to you.
mhm,
Not just the ABCs, but I mean, as somebody who studied history, I
mhm,
knew I could give you a well-rounded education about life as growing up as a black girl, a black person in this country and stuff like that. And I wanted to do that. So it was for me a great thing. For her, it wasn't so much.
mhm,
But when you love someone, you stretch yourself. And so at some point, I don't know. I mean, obviously she's not here to be able to say where that moment came with the light went on with her,
mhm,
with her. And it's just like, okay, this is Peter's child, and we have to deal with this.
mhm,
And she just embraced you as her own.
mhm,
I mean, embrace you like, you know, the hug, that big giant hug that you are mine now.
mhm.
And that was one of the best things that happened also because then she was no longer your stepmother. Then we told you that you couldn't call her Donna anymore. You had to call her mommy.
Yeah.
And just like that, you started calling her mommy.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's mommy.
That's funny because I don't remember. I don't. This is the first time I've heard you say that I called her Donna before,
Yeah.
but I guess that makes sense. So just everybody who's listening along to kind of pull this through. When I say mommy, that's who I'm referring to because that's who my mommy's who raised me. So my mother, Joan Donna Griffith, is who my father married and in 81 and she, the fact that she was 19, well, as I got older and understood how young she was,
Yeah.
I think was a helpful factor in terms of us bonding because, she was very playful, right?
Yeah.
She was very much like, you know, it, it felt seamless and easy. And I remember one of the memories that I have, and I was telling my kids about this, is how soft her hands were.
Hmm.
And that she would like lotion my legs and I would just sit back and be like, "Oh, this is like the best," and without any knowledge of any other way of being, but
Hmm.
I remember that. And when you think about like the things that your mother does, like hug you and your mother's touch and cooking and all those things, those are the things that I remember. And I wanted to kind of bring us to this conversation because, you know, mommy for us was pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Well, the audience and folks who are listening, and we'll see this later on, mostly only know who mommy is because of what happened to her,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so we haven't gotten that to that yet, but I want to sort of preface it in
Mhm.
that one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you is because many people have heard about me. I talk about mommy all the time, right? But I wanted to have the opportunity for us to talk about who mommy was for
Yeah.
us and to put a not just story, but some depth to her her legacy, right? And who she was and how she added value and left her mark and impact on the world.
Mhm.
And that's so important. So we know how you met her. Tell me
Mhm.
what are some of the favorite memories you had of those early days. Couple of what comes up for you.
I think just the fact that she was smart. Um, it's good to find someone who matches you in terms of your intellectual ability,
Mhm.
and you're kind of bird way.
Oh, sorry. There you go. I moved. Go ahead. Hmm.
She was really, really intelligent, and she was an avid reader. And we spent many hours together reading. I reading my science fiction, she reading her romance novels. Um, we had really good times. I mean, having a 4-year-old means that there's lots of stuff you can't do. But I think the extended family of Juliet and Phyllis and who are her sisters,
Mhm.
they made it easy because we could always take you over there
Mhm.
and they could always babysit. And when they want to go out, they can always bring their kids to us. And there was always that sense that there were always people around. There was always a family situation. But specifically, we spent we went camping. Remember, just one particular time, just me and her,
Mhm.
and we were new to camping, and we went to a place called Uncle Pete's, in I think in the Adirondacks, in near Kingston, New York. And we got up there in my little orange Toyota Celica. I know you remember that car.
You.
Yes. And we went up there and we had this little tent, wasn't very big, and it was pouring.
Mhm.
And we found some place that was nice and dry and we set the tent up and everything. This is the first time I think we'd ever really gone camping.
Mhm.
And it rained like crazy. And it rained to the point where it was seeping into the tent, under the tent. We were wet,
Oh
got
God.
up in the middle of the night and went in the car and slept. I mean, the next morning we were like, okay, it's time to go home because this is, and we drove into Kingston and we found a laundromat,
Mhm.
drove back to the site and got the tent and the stuff.
Mhm.
I took it to the laundromat and washed it and went back and found a dry place and had a really great time.
Mhm.
One of the things about her is that she was very affectionate and loving.
Mhm.
And I mean, since I'm an affectionate person, we were perfect for each other in that way. We were always hugging on each other, always dancing together and,
Mhm.
just touching each other. It was nothing to be in the kitchen kissing each other.
Mhm.
People tell you to get a room, you know.
Yes. Um, yes. I'll take a pause there because I grew up in East New York, Brooklyn. That's where we lived for, most of my childhood. And a lot of my friends didn't have a family unit that was together, or, a husband and a wife. And so
Yeah,
my friends would come over and be like, A, oh my goodness, your dad's there. And then B, you all would be hugging all over each other, et cetera. And I think that for so many of my friends, you were their family unit too, right? It wasn't just me understanding that that's who you all were, but them. And and that having that structure, whether, sort of adopted or not in that space was helpful to so many people to see what they want to strive for.
yeah,
Right. I knew from when I was very young that that's a family unit that I wanted. I did not want, I mean, obviously people don't necessarily want to have structure, fractured family units, but I wanted to have something similar to what you
yeah.
all had.
And I mean, to the point, you also had Julia and
Uncle Victor
Phyllis,
and
who
Philip.
also had,
Yep.
you know, a male in the home also. So it was something that you saw
Yep.
as a normal, as
Mhm.
an abnormal thing. So, I mean, it was never something that was, I mean, it was something you talked about, but it was just how it was.
Mhm.
And to us taking showers together and just
All
being
right, okay, all right, daddy. Okay. Oh, oh goodness. Anyway, so I wanna take a quick sidestep. So mommy was from Jamaica.
yes, she came to the United States, I think when she was I'm not even sure how old she was, but I know she went to elementary school
Mhm. Yep.
and I think she graduated a year early from Rasmus. I think she went to another high school, but she went to Rasmus for her last year and was able to 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 come out, I think, a year earlier or 6 months earlier, something like that. And
Mhm.
then she went to Florida State
Mhm. Mhm.
and she was there, I think, for 2 years when she got ill.
Mhm. Mhm.
She developed Bell's palsy, and that's how come she was back in New York. She came to New York for treatment, and while she was here, she got a job.
Mhm.
She had a boyfriend in Florida.
Eh,
He when I came around, he was gone.
mhm.
But things.
Okay, all right. Anyway, so this is like turning into a dynasty episode. But anyway,
I
okay.
was nervous. Yeah,
So I wanted to just make sure that we made that connection in terms of where she come from
yeah,
and saying so and mommy had three sisters,
yeah,
two brothers, Calvin and Junior, and we talked about Ruth, Juliet, and
yes,
Phyllis. And so and then they all have a myriad of my cousins who are peppering the world. Because if we did this and did not mention them, we would be in trouble. So
yes,
I don't want to
yes,
be in
yes, yes.
trouble. And I hope to be able to do a podcast with my aunts as well at some
Well,
point.
that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about some of the favorite memories, and I guess I'll share a couple as well. I'm glad you mentioned that mommy loved to read because I lament the fact that now we can read on devices because my kids don't actually see me holding a lot of books,
Yeah,
although I do read a lot as well.
yeah,
But I was just this past weekend at the Grand Army Plaza at the library, and it brought back all of these memories. I mean, I was there to see the Jay-Z exhibit, but that's another story. But it brought back all these memories of when we used to go there, and mommy would just pack tote bags full of those
yeah,
Harlequin romances and other romance novels, and she
yes,
read so, so much. Like, I would see her with a book all the time. And both of you, to your point about being avid readers, it instilled upon me that reading was something that I had to do
mhm.
because there would just be times where all of us would be in a room reading.
Read it. Yes,
Yep. And the other thing is museums and sort of love of like the places we did New York stuff, right? Which is
yeah,
and I think I realized that I don't necessarily do as much New York stuff, and I didn't do as much New York stuff with my kids because they have opportunities to go other places, right? But we didn't, we weren't like, affluent. But we did do a lot of things that were New York focused. And then when I was 8, along came my sister, and Joanne
mhm,
was born. And so then we had a family structure that was different than, I had you both to myself, and then we had, my sister, and that shifted a lot for us
yeah,
in terms of
yeah,
our family unit. So
yeah,
a
yeah.
little bit about that.
It obviously it creates a different dynamic because now the focus is no longer on you.
Mhm,
Focus is on her.
mhm,
Um, and you know, she was in the hospital because she was born 2 pounds 6 ounces.
mhm. 8
And
ounces, 8 ounces.
okay, 2 pounds eight.
You're welcome.
She was she was in the hospital for a couple of months, and that was hard on mommy because she would go there every day and feed her and with a little syringe or whatever. And she would come home and sometimes she would cry about it because, her baby was in the hospital.
Mm,
And then she came home and everything changed because now the focus, like I said, was no longer on you.
mhm.
But then you were old enough to, you know, I guess to understand that, now you have a little sister to play with or whatever, which I don't think you particularly like, but kids are funny at that age because especially when everything is about them. And now the focus is on something else.
Yes, yes, definitely. I remember the shift, but it was interesting because I think at least, and again, I'm thinking of it from obviously my perspective as a young kid, but I felt like for mommy, it felt like the unit was more whole because right, because then you both had a child of your own as right, and but to that end, I never in my entire life felt as if I wasn't her child. Like it was very much like 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 we did Girl Scouts together. We did all of these things that we did, and was never um in my mind any question that I can remember. At least I
To
can.
the fact that most of your cousins didn't know that you had a different mother.
Yep. Yeah. 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 So okay. So then I go away to boarding school.
Yes.
So I went to Deerfield Academy, which my father mentioned a little bit earlier, which is in Deerfield, Massachusetts, which is in Western Mass, and it's a boarding school, so you're living there. And so I left when I was 14, and at that point, was it before? No, it was right. It was right after that. Then you all moved to New Jersey.
Yes. Yes. I think I don't know what year you went to boarding school, but we came up here in '92.
Yeah, I was 91 is when I went to.
No, we came here in '92. A lot of it was the neighborhood was really changing drastically.
Mhm.
And mommy was like, Joanne is going to start school soon. Let's get out of here. And in a couple of months, we moved up here. That was a big change for us. Now you're living in the suburbs and you have to worry about mowing the lawn and, all kinds of different stuff. And it was, it was difficult because we were commuting every day from Willenboro, which is like, I think 90 miles away from New York or something like that.
Mhm.
Every day to New York, we would get up ridiculous hours in the morning and have to take the bus
Oh
into
man.
the city. And it was difficult because that drive was hard on your body. Mm, but I mean, I mean, it's something we decided we wanted to do. So
Mhm.
it wasn't a matter of we had to, it's a matter of we wanted to do this. So we did.
So that commute is something that when I think about the mommy reading books, like that's what she would be getting her
Yeah.
stock for the week for, and then would
Yes.
read books and then return them back, and she would read what 2 or 3 books like going up and coming back, and
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
She tore those books up like crazy. She
mhm,
was just unbelievable reader.
yeah,
And the thing about it was she would not read anything else.
hmm
She wouldn't read she wouldn't read biography, she would not read and one of the things that people don't realize about these books is these books, because they're a lot of romance, there's a lot of them are set in Europe and different places and stuff, and that idea of going places in a book, she went lots of places and she knew lots of stuff because she read these books. I mean, you can think that you don't gain anything from reading them, but
hmm
just reading them brings you information that you will not have before about how people live, how you're supposed to do things. I mean, she knew a whole lot about a whole lot of stuff from reading these books.
yeah, and I mean, I'm sure that that was most of what I saw, but in terms of the knowledge point, she also watched a lot of musicals. She like, she ingested a lot of information, a lot of different ways, and you know, a part of what I remember a lot is how we love Mary Pop. Like we loved a lot of the
Yes.
musicals because that's what we would sit and watch together when I was a kid and when I was older as well too. So I'm thinking about when I was away at boarding school in
Mhm.
1993.
Mhm.
Mommy and you all were still commuting to and from New York City, Lower Manhattan to Williamsburg, New Jersey. And I remember when the World Trade Center was bombed in 1993,
Yeah.
that I remember being pulled out of class and them saying that the towers had been bombed, and um I remember being up until the late that night, and then calling and having a call with you all because she had finally come home. And I remember her talking about going down the stairs and her back had hurt and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
what I remember the most from that was her saying that she was gonna go back.
Mhm.
It wasn't at night, but it was after that. Like, I remember being like, "Okay, well, they're bombing stuff, so let's not go
Yeah.
there."
Yeah. Yeah.
But I remember specifically having a conversation with her saying that she was gonna go back.
Mhm.
And so tell me about how that was on the adult side when all that happened.
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't remember much about it.
Mhm,
Um, it was just like a blip, a blip in our lives. I know it would, coming down all them stairs and stuff was difficult for her.
mhm,
Uh, but beyond that, it wasn't any, we didn't really have a conversation about whether she was going to go back or not. At least I don't remember.
mhm,
And I need you to understand that there's a lot of stuff I don't remember because there've been a lot of since
mhm.
obviously September the 11th, there've been a lot of brain trauma and with that, and there's a lot of memories that I really don't have anymore.
Let's just tell the truth also that mommy and I talk together every day, and I would
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
mother had
Daddy,
an 8.
daddy would get a call when the car window wouldn't go down. And otherwise, daddy wouldn't hear from you. But mommy would come home and say, yeah, I sent her some money today.
Mhm,
And, I mean, the thing about it is just like whatever she did with you, she would come home and tell me I did this or I did that or whatever, whatever. So we knew what was going on in terms of how things were going with you and how she might have been helping you or whatever, which has always been a big focus in her life,
mhm.
you know.
Yeah, my mother, back in those days that, you had to pay per minute when you had calls and long distance, etcetera. So, but at at her job, and mommy worked at Fiduciary Trust in the World Trade Center, she had an 800 number. So, I I was in boarding school, so I would literally call her every day, and they would put me on hold and go find her, and I loved that. And she'd be like, "What do you want?" I'm like, "Just to say hi." But we would talk, and she would tell me what's going on with the family, and she was really like my lifeline to what was happening otherwise, because that was before email and social media and all that stuff, so I didn't really know other than those calls. And so what I remember about that time was feeling super disconnected because something had happened, but the person who would be telling about it normally was in it. And so
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that fear that I had because it had happened there. And you know terrorism was something that happened in other countries, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
anything that we worried about. We worried about like local crime as opposed to, crime
Yes.
that
Like
was
something.
exactly. So let's fast forward. Well, let's talk a little bit more about there's one question that I think that I wanted to hear your thoughts about. We kind of talked about how she was as a mother. I don't know if you want to add anything else about her as a mother for me and Joanne, et cetera, just
And
generally.
let's talk about you for a moment
Okay.
and the fact that you wouldn't get up in the morning unless you had hot chocolate. And the hot chocolate was brought to you. I think then we had bunk beds, and you would get your hot chocolate with your eyes closed, and you would drink hot chocolate. You would not get up unless you had the hot chocolate. Who, you do what you have to do in order to get your kids going, and we did what we had to do. I mean, she was just so wonderful in terms of how she took care of you and took care of Joanne and, made sure everything was okay with the two of you. And, you know,
Yeah.
she was a wonderful person, wonderful mother.
Yes. And she could cook. I mean, when I think about like the full package of a wife in the traditional roles, like she worked and she commuted and she cooked and she cleaned. Oh my goodness. She cleaned.
Yeah. So
Well,
she would come home and have a meal ready in like 40 minutes or something.
mhm,
And she could, I mean, I would talk to her about this stuff. She could take a recipe and know what to substitute for what she didn't have or whatever. I couldn't understand a lot of that stuff, how she did this, how she knew what to substitute or whatever. But she was really good cooking and baking and stuff like that. She was really a well-rounded person.
yep.
Very
Um,
well.
yes. And to kind of tie into what I was talking about with my grandmother, my mother was very much a dresser.
Yes.
And when I think about how, I tell my kids that, walk outside looking a certain way, and then right, and that when I'm gonna do something, I'm speaking, et cetera, that I know that I have to look a certain way. That was a direct connection to how mommy raised me, right? Whether or not I rebelled at some point, because we know that I did, I understood and knew what the parameters were, and it's a part of how I built my brand around particularly having a knowledge and understanding of how to show up.
Mhm, mhm. You are not going outside like that. No, come back. Come.
There was a lot of comebacks.
Yeah.
There was a lot of comebacks, especially when we lived in Brooklyn, but it's okay. Anyway, actually, one anecdote that I remember, speaking of dressing, was that when I went to Deerfield, I was this kid from East New York, right? But I think we had, the lower part of middle
Yeah,
class,
yeah,
but
yeah, okay.
we showed up as middle
Yes.
and upright, and so my mother was like, "You have to have penny loafers." She's like, "You have to have penny loafers in order to go to boarding school because that's what they have." And then, people think you put pennies inside the penny loafers, but I remember she was like, "Well, I'm gonna put 2 dimes in there because so you remember that your value." And I was like, "Why are we putting coins in these shoes?" But when I think about it now, it was like you set a standard, right? Like that I was gonna be in this place where folks had more resources, knew more, right? But that they were not better than me, right? So that same
Yes,
kind of
yes,
connection that
yes.
you talked about before. So I wanted to sort of share that because there's a lot of lessons that I learned when you talk about shaping who I am, and yes, even being here, right here now, is because of the values and the lessons and the things that mommy taught me, and that I experienced with both of you as my parents. Okay, so let's talk about some of we talked about her reading, but songs that she loved, quotes, or
She
anything.
loved, I mean, the thing about her is she loved music from the '60s.
Mhm.
You know, we both had love for Beach Boys music, Beatles music. I mean, just and singing around the house, singing out loud and just,
Yeah,
just enjoying the atmosphere in the house because I played a lot of music. And because of that, we always had what they say, the soundtrack of our lives. And it was really something because after she died, I realized how much the music meant to our relationship. And it was hard for me to deal with that, because I did a lot of crying at my desk at work, hearing music that touched me because it was music that we shared together. There's some music now that I'm still not comfortable listening to because it was very special to her and special to me. And she was just, like I said, a wonderful wife. And and even better than that, she was a really good friend. Was a really good friend. I mean, when you have somebody who is as smart as you are, you can't come with bullshit. You have to come. I mean, she had that kind of brain where she could take something and break it down and know what to do with it. She was in many ways a lot smarter than I was. But
yeah,
it's mommy.
yeah. When I think about, growing up, the music was a big piece of it, and the one song that comes up whenever I think about her song as opposed to a musical
Mhm.
is "Rainy Days and Mondays."
Yes, yes. There was something about that. I think when she was younger, um, I don't know, I don't remember the story behind it, but that song meant a whole lot to her because I think it's a song that she might have heard or it did something to her. I think she did a lot of cleaning on Saturday mornings to that music, and I mean she was younger, and so it was something that
Love it.
she always liked to hear because it made her feel good.
Yeah, like, I remember her, like, singing it, like, out loud, and it's interesting because now I hear that song, and I, like, maybe, like, I'm thinking, like, but it doesn't have the connection other than to her, right? It's not like I don't have whatever the deeper piece of it,
Yes, yes,
but there was definitely a lot of music played out loud when I grew up. The other thing that you used to do all the time was to have there's a lot of video of our lives, and
yes,
this was, like, before there was terabyte mini chips. It was actually video, like,
yes,
VHS tapes of that you would just have the VCR running, and because of that, and I'm grateful for that as being part of who you are, that there's a lot of just video of us being us.
yes, yes, yes. I mean, and one of the things is because I'm a photographer, and you get memories from looking at pictures.
Mhm.
And one I have in particular is us going to the beach to fly a kite, and it's like the things I wanted for you, the things that I had when I was growing up.
Mhm.
And I mean, we did stuff that I would have wanted to do, or I did when I was young. And that was one of the memories that really, I mean, she didn't have to come, but if we were going someplace, and that's another thing too, we were always together. We were together a lot, which which is when I think about the fact that we were together for 20 years and 5 days or 6 days. We spent a lot more time than that together. I mean, you can say it's 20 years, but it was a hell of a lot more than that because it was packed into those 20 years that we spent together.
Yeah. Gosh, I just thought about the kites. I can see the pictures. And I don't want to run over that point because when you're thinking about, I started off saying that you were instrumental on building my brand because you were. But one of the things I'm very serious about is is pictures and how they are framed and how they're structured and how people look in them. And I would say a little bit more than serious
Oh,
about it. I'm a little bit obsessed to my kids who do not want to take pictures, and I don't care, and I'm gonna make them take pictures. But I've been documenting my entire life. Like, I have pictures
yes.
from when I was a baby all the way, and a lot of people can't say that, and to think about how technology has shifted during that time, that you still, number 1, understood the importance of documenting. Like, I look back at those pictures and I think how lucky I am to be able to see them and know throughout those times that that it was important for you to do, and that is something that I directly attribute to you having that love too, that I have the love as
Mhm.
well, except that I use an Android phone as opposed to an actual camera.
Okay.
Anyway, I'll get to it at some point, being an actual camera person. Okay. So there was a lot in there to your point about it being packed. I want to, before we move on to talking about 9/11, was when you think about some of the dreams and aspirations that mommy had, what comes up?
I think she wanted to graduate college. I think that was a big thing for her. Uh, and she did go back. She went to Medgar Evers for a couple of semesters, but it's kind of tough having kids and trying to go to school at night.
Mhm.
Um, and that was difficult, obviously. She never did finish because we moved up here, and then that commute destroyed any chance of being able to go to school because it was basically an hour and a half each way. But I think the big thing was that she wanted you and Joanne to have a better life than she had because I think her growing up was kind of rough, and I think she poured into you and into Joanne the values that she grew up with, and the values that we share together, the values of value in education, value in family, value in fun, you know, value in laughter, and reading, and really understanding how important education was to your success. And that was a big, big deal for her.
Every single time, I know a fact, but every single time you remind me that mommy didn't graduate, I'm always like, "What?" Like, I'm shocked in my head because education was such an important piece for her, and I
Yes,
remember you all, I was like a latchkey kid, you all going, to school at night and going to college, so that the point of you all making that effort, whether or not a degree came from it, for her was solidified. Like, I knew that I had to go to college. Like, it was not a
yes.
question as to whether I was gonna to be doing that or not.
I
Um,
think I think that was drilled into you from early. So there wasn't any choice about going to college because it was always I couldn't achieve college. You had to pass me in terms of what you did.
yeah,
And I'm very happy that you did. I mean, that was like a big, big, big deal.
yeah. So, let's talk about mommy at work, right? So, this other than my kind of connection, I knew a lot of her coworkers because I would call and they knew who I was, and they would say how proud they were of the things that I was doing. So I knew that she talked about me a lot, and then I learned a lot from them after she died.
Hmm.
But mommy would tell me also about the things that were happening at work, and I don't know how deeply, I should say, she didn't really talk deeply about some of the challenges or anything like that, but I knew she was really proud of what and she took a lot of pride in showing up in her job, and so I don't know
Yeah.
if you have something to add about that.
Yeah. So you talk about the dressing. Casual Corners was a store in, I think it was in the World Trade Center, and she would come home with suits. Like,
And learners
but y-
and
she,
tailor-law.
she had she had a ton of suits, and it spoke to how she wanted to show up. Okay, so people saw her, and they saw her what they call dressed to the nines. She was always put together because she could always. I mean, okay, this, and she would always look fantastic. I mean, going to church on Sunday morning, it was like, wow. I mean, she was just immaculate in the way how she, and very purposeful
Yeah,
in the way how she put herself together and what she showed the world of who she was. Now,
100%.
now in terms of the work, she rose quickly in the company she was in. Despite the fact she didn't have a degree. What she did have was a brain that was incredible. And she caught on to a lot of stuff that a lot of other people didn't. And I mean, at one point she was offered jobs by some of the, the companies that were servicing her company because she knew the system as good as some of their engineers because she was that good. And she knew how to manipulate the system in ways that they didn't know was possible. And like I said, they offered a job, but you can't do that when, especially these kind of job where you go someplace for 6 months or whatever. You can't do that when you have little kids. So, that avenue was open to her, but she was very proud of how far she'd come in the company. I think she was always a little mindful of the fact that she didn't have a degree to say this is what I have, but she was something else in terms of her ability and how she did her job. And I think what we saw at home in terms of somebody who could manage the house and do these things, that taken to the job, and she did. She managed in a really wonderful way that her people absolutely loved her, and they they cherished her because she treated them really well. And in fact, a lot of them were very, very loyal to her because she treated them and gave them opportunity to grow.
Yeah. The folks who she worked with, you know, a lot of the things that they said about her, subsequently after she died was about how she mentored them and she cared about them personally, not just at work. And I think that that kind of impact in the workplace, especially when we think about workplaces now where people don't stay for long times,
Yeah,
or they,
yeah,
or people leave because the culture is terrible. They say people don't leave places, they leave people. And when so you have someone who really cares about you and your growth, I really love that work ethic that I think, to your point, was home and work, and it was sort of seamless in that way.
yes, yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Okay, so let's talk about work and what happened on September 11th. So at this point, just so you both know where we were parallel in this space, Daddy, you were working in Philadelphia.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
and I was living in California. Uh,
right.
that's another podcast for another day. So tell me, how did you find out about the attacks?
So I was at work. We were in our little cubicles, and I was sorting some papers, lots of them. And I think somebody passed and said, something is going on at the World Trade Center or whatever. So I went into what we had, what, a TV room with a lot of computers and a TV in a corner. And I saw that one of the buildings were burning. And I went and I told my manager, I said, one of the World Trade Center buildings is burning. And I got back to my desk and I was there still doing the papers or whatever. And she called and she said that, you know, that it looks like looked like a plane hit the building next to her. And she said she could see the fuselage and stuff down on the ground. And there was a lot of confusion and stuff. So anyhow, she said, I remember correctly, she just said, okay, I'll talk to you later or whatever. Just something along those lines. So I was back at my desk and my niece called me and she said, Donna's building is burning. I said, no, it's the other building. And she said, no, I'm on the roof of the building that I work in because she worked uptown. So she was looking downtown and she saw both buildings burning. So Donna called me back. No, wait a minute. I might be wrong here. She called me back and she told me that there were people, the building was burning and she could see people jumping out the building. And I said, get out. And that was the last I heard from her.
Mm.
I obviously I don't I don't know how far she got before the other plane hit the building. I don't like to think about what possibly could have happened to her because that doesn't help me in any way, but I just know that when they said the building fell, I knew she couldn't make it down. I mean, she was on the 97th floor. And getting from the 97th floor, there's no way she could have gotten anywhere close to 40th floor by the time that plane hit. And I think it might have hit below the 97th floor. So that was it. And I just started crying. I was sitting at my desk and I was crying and I was still sorting papers. I was kind of like in shock. You know, I was still sorting papers and my manager and her manager came over and they basically got me up and they told me to go home and they they got one of the other co-workers there, a guy named George, and told him to go with me. They would give him a cab slip and he drove me and he came home with me. I mean, me and this guy was not the biggest buddy, but here he is across from me and I'm dying inside. I'm dying inside and I'm coming down 95 in Philadelphia. And I remember going on to the Betsy Ross Bridge and there's a oil refinery there and you can see the gas coming out of the top of the flame coming out of the gas. And remember that vividly. And I remember getting home. Yeah, I was going to be okay. And I said, yeah. And I, I went inside and the phone rang and the person says, Joan there. And I was like, um, she's at work. And the person says, oh my God, it was our lawyer. We had an appointment that night to sign our wills. And I think I came in and I started cleaning because I was in so much shock. I mean, I was just, you know, I knew she was dead. I mean, I knew she was gone. I could just feel it. And it was like, I guess the beginning of the shock of knowing that, you know, that we had just come back 5 days earlier from a cruise for our 20th anniversary. And she was so happy because she went with her sister and the two of them, you know, like two peas in a pod and they had a great time, you know, her sister and her husband, and we had a great time and everything. And here we were now. And it was funny, the night before September 11th, I remember it was a Monday or Tuesday. I think she was home and she got up and she put on some clothes and she went over to a friend of ours' house, friend of mine named Ava. And she went over there and Ava told me later, it was very strange because she never did this before, but she was like in her bedroom on her water bed and stuff, you know, and she was just having a good time or whatever. And then she came home and, you know, we went to sleep and I don't remember if I was up the next morning to see her off because by then I was working in Philadelphia and I didn't have to leave home as early as she did. So I don't remember whether I saw her that morning or we just said bye and kissed or what. I don't remember any of that, but all I know is she was gone.
I just realized, like, this is the first time that I've heard the breadth of that story from you. Like, I mean, obviously, I know the pieces of it, but yeah. So on the flip side, 3,000 miles away, I was in California, and at this point, I was living with an ex-boyfriend who definitely shall not be named, and and we had gotten a big screen 60-inch TV the weekend before. So September 11th was a Tuesday, and we got in that big screen TV, and so it was, 6 such in the morning, and he came into the room and said, "The World Trade Center just got hit by it." And what was wild about the footage was that it wasn't at all tempered. They were showing, you could see people jumping, like, it was just cameras on the buildings, and you could hear the broadcasters just in shock as they were reporting these,
Yeah.
like, and seeing these things, and then I remember calling that 800 number, that same number that had my and the lines were down. You could not I was able to get through to you once, and when I talked to you, and it was brief, you were crying.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna call mommy." Like, I was just in my mind, I was like, "All right, good. Well, this sucks, but I'm sure she's fine." Like, I was again that
Mhm.
shock of it all. And I kept calling, and I kept calling, and I kept calling, and I kept calling. And I went to work. Like, I was home when that happened, and I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna go work. Da, da, da." I get to work, and I remember sitting at my table or my cubicle, like, similar to what you were saying, and just doing whatever I was doing on the computer. But then I would keep calling the number. I would keep calling the number as if she was gonna answer.
Mhm.
And then when the towers went down, people kept coming in. I mean, and I'll give a shout out here for 2 people. For the company I worked at was Sage Software, which is Sage. I didn't have a lot of family. I didn't have family there in California, but I had friends, and they made sure they were like, "Go home, go home." And I was like, "I can't go home," because at this point I was with this guy who I didn't really like. I didn't really want to be with him anymore, but I was stubborn. Anyways, long story. So going home was not going to be helpful to me.
Mhm.
So being there at work, I mean, my friends, they brought me food. Like, it was just, I felt well taken care of in this horrific time. And it was what, 2 weeks or something like that before I was able to travel because, they stopped flight, like, you
Yeah.
couldn't fly, and I was not trying to be on a train across country because everybody was scared about everything at that point. We didn't know what was gonna happen next, and then, thankfully, when the lines got I was able to call and speak to you and Joanne, and obviously, at that point, my sister, she was 16 and in high school, and so kind of our whole world flipped upside down, and I don't want to, um let it go without saying who that lawyer was, who you were gonna meet with, because she was such an instrumental part of us being okay, and I think really a catalyst for me thinking of even about being a lawyer. And so shout out always to Angela Titus, who is one of the best estate attorneys, wonderful people who I've ever met, and is truly the embodiment of what you call counselor as opposed to just lawyer.
Mhm.
Um, and and having her to be able to have us help us navigate the whole process of not just the will, but also dealing with the compensation fund and all of that process. I don't know how we would have been able to really do it without having someone like her
Mhm.
in that.
Well, let me stop you there, okay? I was paralyzed. I was paralyzed. Losing someone who you are tied to, I mean, tied to very tightly, because even at year 20, we were still very much in love with each other. And losing her, it was it was like I was dead. And I say that Peter died in the World Trade Center with her. I was just numb. I mean, I think I was numb for quite a long time. And this is where giving you the education that you got and the values and the understanding about family and stuff like that became very important because what I could not do, and I couldn't do a lot, and I will admit that I was just numb. I would I would be at meetings and I would have no idea what's going on. And you were instrumental in holding my hand. And I said, what would I have done without you? What would I have done if I didn't have a daughter who was able to come and say, okay, daddy, this is what's going to happen. Here's what's this. And the thing about it is I realized there's a lot of stuff that I never knew happened because people kept things from me. And I was glad that they did because I was just not capable of doing anything. I was just so numb for such a long time. And I I say you say I shout out to Angela, but my niece, baby,
Oh, yes. Of
I
course,
mean,
of course.
if not for her, I don't know what would happen to me, which is why I love her so dearly
Yeah.
because she made sure I was okay. She held my hand for a long time because she had moved up here to stay with us, um, I think a couple of years before. And if she was not here, I don't know what would have happened. I mean, I probably would have scraped through, but not the way I did because she was so instrumental in making sure I was okay. And you were great in handling the stuff. And I realized that you 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 had a lot of grief just like I did, but you did something with your grief. You turned it into activism in terms of for our family. And I don't know how you dealt with a lot of the stuff externally, but I know that you threw yourself into taking care of me and making sure our family was okay. And it was a testament to, like I said, who you were and who you would become. That you were so strong when I was so weak, and I was so weak. It was a bad, bad time. But
Yeah,
anyhow,
yeah. When people say that mourning is not a straight line, mourning takes on now 22 years later, I still miss my mother. Like it's not, it
yeah,
doesn't go away. It just, it happens in different waves, etc. But what I remember about that time and thinking about baby is what we call her, but her name is Dina Codrington, and that's my cousin, his niece, but they're similar in age. Long story. That's for chapter 17 of the novel. But she's very much someone who takes care of people. That's one of the things that I love the most about her. That if you are sick, she will make sure that you feel better. If you are hungry, you will never be hungry and she is such a special person. And it's why and mommy loved her, right? And
oh
and
yes,
and 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 they loved each other. And so when I think about that time, you were not. When I think about daddy, like it's kind of almost like you're like this like over there kind of person who I loved, but very much deified. Like it's kind of like I am the epitome of daddy's girl. Like that's we were down from the beginning. But
you're blurry. Okay.
I know when I can't keep it moving. When I when I flew back, when I finally was able to fly back, and again, the company I work for, they paid for my flight. I flew back, and I remember the pilot saying, "For those of you who are from New York, welcome home." And I like burst into tears. And by the time I got off the plane, I was like, "I'm not gonna cry anymore. I cannot cry. I'm not gonna do that." Right? But I didn't tell you I was coming because I didn't want you to be scared that I was gonna be in a plane. And when I got there, you were in the hospital because you had a panic attack. And and a really good friend of mine, James, who again I had met in California, he picked me up from the airport, drove me home, and when I got home, baby was like, "He's in the hospital," and I came to the hospital. I remember walking into the hospital behind the curtain, And I came out of the car and we just both collapsed into each other crying. And although I knew what was real at that point, it was really real then. Like, it was like, "Oh my gosh, she's gone." And while we understood, extended family didn't necessarily have that same realization, right? We had, my aunts that suffered from Florida had come to New York to search for mommy. At that point, there were a lot of people who, were in hospital, like, folks found people and, there were missing signs and all that. We had our family really coalesced um, to support each other at that time, but I think we both had the realization that she was gone.
Yes, yes,
And
I think I mean, I definitely knew, but, you know, grief is an interesting thing, and you can't tell people how to grieve, and, you we went different places looking, I knew she was gone.
and one of the things, as you mentioned, that you had celebrated your 20th anniversary week before, and there's two things that I remember about that trip. One is that I finally had like a little bit of money because I had a job, and so I was like, I'm gonna do something nice for
Oh
them,
my god.
and so that you were on a cruise, and I had called to get balloons and a bottle of champagne and a cake,
Yes,
and yeah,
but there was a sign that says happy anniversary in the room we went there too. I still have that.
yeah.
I still have that. That was you didn't know how proud mommy was of you. I mean, oh my god, it was like, Paula, she was just, you know
It was something she would have done.
yes.
And so
Yeah,
I remember thinking like, I'm gonna do something grown, like,
and
uh,
as much money as she was giving you, I'm sure
yes,
it's she was surprised that you had enough money to do that, but she was very happy with that.
yes, so right before then, so I had come to Jersey, I'd seen you both in August of that year because I'd come from California because I was gonna go to Caravana in Toronto,
Mhm,
and I'm glad I had taken the trip because I had the opportunity to spend some time with mommy in August, and we had gone shopping. And it was one of the things that mommy and I used to do where she was like, "Don't tell daddy we did this." But she had we had gone to, oh gosh, and I'm gonna forget the name of the department store, but she'd opened a cart so we can get a discount, but we bought a bunch of clothes. And I had come there essentially with like two empty suitcases and they were full and actually bought a suitcase. And and when I went to Caravana, I had all this stuff because she had bought me this stuff, and that was not the first time she had done that. And thinking about the having that chance to spend time with her, just she and I before this all happened and before your anniversary was something special that I remember. But one thing that was very different about that trip was that you'd gone on trips before. You'd always vacation and done stuff, but it was never something where she would say like, "Here's other than here's where we're staying," or here and here's the hotel or what the flight. She said she wrote, and I have this paper still. She wrote down the financial planner that Angela, the lawyer who I talked about. She wrote
mhm,
all that information down on a piece of paper and gave it to me. And reflecting back to think about like I needed that information because you were a mess.
yeah,
And I was able to act on the information she'd given me, which she had never done before. And it's almost like the universe, right? Like God, like whatever deity is there, understood that that had to happen in order for us to be, and I say okay with quotation marks because we're still not okay, right? Like we're still impacted by
yeah,
mommy being gone, but that it would have been so much more challenging if she hadn't. It was like that last piece of love to
yeah,
say, "Here's what you need to take care of this because I'm
right.
not."
So let me say this to you. I don't know whether it was a holdover from the first bombing of the World Trade Center or what it was, but we talked about the fact that one of us was gonna leave the other. We talked about we knew that something was gonna happen. I mean, we just feared, and I wouldn't even say feared, we just knew it was something was gonna happen. And a couple of months before that, that's when she went and got the lawyer and started working on the will. That's where we had gotten. financial advisor. It's like all these things are being put in place. Was it just something was done? No, this is something that she said we needed to do because this was important. And we went to the financial advisor, and then the financial advisor told us because she makes a hell of a lot more money than you, we need to put more insurance on her. So when she died, we had that money because she had set out to make sure that we would be okay if something happened to her. And it's come like I knew something was. She would come home late at night by 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 private car from New York when she worked late, and I always disliked that because I find myself at the window looking out for her whenever a car passes, something like that, because I was fearful that something was going to happen to her, and I didn't think that it was going to be like this. But God in His infinite wisdom makes decisions that we 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 don't have really the right to ask why. We just deal with it. I always say that if I complained about the fact that mommy was gone and she was taken, I would be doing a disservice to the 20 years that God gave me with her, because those 20 years was so wonderful. I mean, I had a really great life, really great. One child was gone, never to come home, and 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 I had one that I was working on, but that was a bit challenging. You started saying to yourself, I don't think this one is ever going to leave home, but we were happy. We were so happy. It was like, if- excuse me. It was. I'm not going to say perfect because we still had a lot of debt from sending you off to college, but we lived well. I mean, we didn't want for stuff. If we needed something, we got it. We did well, and it was just sad that was the that was how it turned out. But like I said, I'm thankful for the 20 years, and I'm thankful for what she brought to my life. One of the things I want to say also is that part of being married, because I was an only child for most of my life. My father had kids. My mother had a child before me. Part of my life was I was alone, so I was very selfish. I mean, everything was Peter. And when I got married, things were rough the first year or two until I made a decision that this is what I wanted. And I gave up being Peter and became part of Peter and Donna. And when that died, and I say that because that partnership died in the World Trade Center, then I had to find myself again, and that was difficult because you don't realize how much you give to a relationship until you don't even know what size shoe you wear. You don't know what, because you share memories and you share information. So she knew what size I was, all these things, and now I have to relearn all these things because she's not there. My rudder was not there because she was the CEO of this house. I
Understand.
was the owner of the company. So she would come to me and she would say, "We doing so and so," and I would say, "Okay," because I knew that she was better at managing stuff than I was. So if she had an idea, we would talk about it and we would go with that. And I lost all of that. And then I had to try to build my life back. And I mean, it was like starting to walk, starting to, walking on your knees before you can get up and try to just be. And I made lots of mistakes. And I don't regret the mistakes I made because they're part and parcel of who I am right now. But I am like that person, but I'm not that person.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
a lot of the stuff that, and talk about crying. I mean, you hear people talk about wailing, and the amount of crying that I did would hurt my head. I mean, because I cried so I couldn't believe that she was gone. I mean, I knew she was gone, but the pain of it, just and then there was the memorial.
Yeah.
You know, we decided that we needed to have a memorial. This was like in October because there was no thought of her being found in a hospital someplace else. So we needed to have some closure on the agony that we were going through. So we set up a memorial, and it was in the church. I used to go to Second Baptist Church in Morristown. Um, and it was amazing. Sonia held my hand as we walked in. My
Sonia's not
son, my
yeah.
son that's one of my cousins, and the place was filled with coworkers, and it just filled. The church was filled with people to the point where there were people in the choir
Overflow.
loft.
There was overflow.
People,
People were outside.
yes, there were like the CEO of my division. I mean, there was a lot of people in. It was just an amazing showing of people, and people came from all over because she was very loved. And it was, I mean, we have it on tape, but the sound is very bad.
Yeah.
It's almost no sound. And I really wish that there was some way to be able to get that sound back. But I can remember you singing, "Just a spoonful of sugar could make the medicine go down."
Yeah.
You don't know how proud I am of you. You don't know. It's like there was a part I was looking at the other day. You holding Vicky's hand as she went up to read. I mean, the memories.
Yeah. I remember that day. I remember leading up to that day because I had to I had to really be who she trained me to be
Yeah.
in those times because I had to lead and the one thing that is hard about being a leader and I have to I feel like I've always been a leader, but to be a leader in a space that I wasn't prepared to lead for, oh, I shouldn't say that because I was prepared for it. I didn't want to, but I
Yes.
knew I had to.
Yes.
It was us going to pick out the flowers at the florist and us and you saying you have to get sunflowers. And I remember sitting there being like, I don't know what flowers she would want. Like daddy has to know what flowers she wants because I don't know
Mhm.
what flowers she would want. And little things. And I remember, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but months after 9/11, I don't know, it might have been a year, they found her purse. They found my mother's purse, and we had to go into Lower Manhattan,
Oh my
the
God.
One Police Plaza,
No, but the municipal building.
whatever. I
Y
remember going downstairs. So oh, yes, through the yes, it was by okay, yes, I know what you're talking about. But we had to go downstairs, and it was like this, like it was like we were in a movie. Like this dank place, you had to go to this window and you had to give this number because every victim of the 9/11 had a number.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they gave us a purse, and it was waterlogged.
Right. But wait a minute before that.
Yeah,
So we get there and they don't wanna give it to us because of something they had, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't do." And I started having a breakdown right there, and the guy gave us the purse
yeah,
and, go ahead.
yeah. No, I I forgot about that part, but I also remembered it wasn't just your breakdown because I remembered I was like, "You don't really want us to have to come back here." Like, I turned I was like, "You're not gonna do that." But it was one of the times where I remember feeling like, I hate that she has been minimized to just being a number. I hate that we have to go through the bureaucracy of the of her being a victim as opposed to me being like, "Are you kidding me? This is my mother. Give
Mhm.
me her purse." Anyway, we get the purse and it's waterlogged. And then we took it home and we went through it. And she had your high school ring in the purse. And I just remember thinking, she had your high school ring. Like she loved you. You know, like it's one thing to know it, right? And it's another thing to have like reminders
Mhm,
of
mhm.
just how much she loved us all.
Yes. Yeah.
And, people throughout these years have asked a lot of times, like, did they find her? And, and yes, we were able to have another memorial because, you know, they found remains. But I never, in all of that time, and people will be like, "Oh, is it hard for you to go down there?" I never thought of her being there. It was like when I go down to the memorial, I think it's I mean, because I studied museum anthropology, I think it's a beautiful memorial. They did a fantastic job of capturing the imprints of the building with and anybody who hasn't been there, I really do think that folks should go there. It is, I think, one of the
Mhm.
best memorials that has been done. But I don't think of my mother as
Yeah.
being.
Yes. So I've come into Manhattan through the tunnel,
Mhm,
and when you're coming up one of the streets, and I remember one day I looked up and I was shocked because the building wasn't there.
mhm,
Because usually you can't see past because and I was like and like you said, I don't think about her as being there.
mhm,
Um and I don't know why, but it's just like it doesn't affect me like that because this is I mean, okay, it's very nice and everything, but mommy's not here. Mommy is not here. Mommy is here. And it's like you I guess it's the relationship that we have with her is like mommy is always here, so she's not there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean it's such it's very nice to see all that, but I really don't care about that stuff. That stuff means absolutely nothing to me. So I could go down there and see her name and it's like, but I mean it's like one day I went down there and I went with a friend of mine and she took a candle and stuff to light. It's like, what? This is not what Peter does. This is not how we are. I am I am looking at this place as a historical thing. I'm not looking at this as a burial ground for my wife.
Yeah,
So for me, it's like, okay, I can go there and walk around it and like not a big
yeah.
deal. It's so funny too because there's a place that I go to take pictures of birds. And as I'm coming back from there, I think it's Abscon or something is the name of the place. They have a piece of metal from the World Trade Center, big piece of bent metal as a memorial. I see this and it's like, yeah, yeah, okay. Like, okay. Um, yeah. I
This
mean,
It's the interesting piece about having lost a family member in the World Trade Center is that it is not as if, she was hit by a car, right?
yeah,
That
yeah.
we have our personal connection to her and having lost her, but it is a very public
Oh
and
my gosh.
shared
Oh
experience
my,
that
oh my,
we it's not as just having lost our mother, our wife, a family member, but also as Americans,
yes,
right? As
yes,
New Yorkers, as
yes.
as as we on multiple levels we experience grief. And that I think was in the hardest piece for me is like it's not a private thing that we can just manage on our own. People are we're always in it with us. And it was very frustrating to have
Yeah.
to show up for other people in that space.
So one of the things that the public grieving, and I mean, I went back to work and I spent many days at my desk crying because the grief doesn't just hit you and move. It comes at you. I went to Best Buy one time and I was watching, they had football games on the thing and I started looking at it and I started crying. You don't know when the tears are going to start coming. You don't know when the overwhelming feeling is going to be on you. I would after she died, I would go outside for a walk and I would walk like maybe 2 houses down and walk back crying, just crying up and down the street because I couldn't just sit down in the house anymore and cry. And people in the neighborhood, they knew what had happened to me. And there was nothing they could do. I mean, there were people who, you know, there was this guy at work who came to me one time and says, he said, if you ever want to talk or go to lunch or something, and I was very taken aback. But I was like, Why you want to take me out to lunch? I don't know. I don't really know you. But years later, I could appreciate the fact that he just wanted to be, he wanted to help me get through the stuff that I've been through. And it was so incredibly public. Everybody knew. Everybody on the job knew what had happened.
Yeah.
So they would see me and I could see it. And I wrote about this in something that I wrote a long time ago. It's like everybody is thankful it's not them, you know. And I don't ask myself why me, because a better question is why not me? Why not my wife? And I know everybody is saying, I feel sorry for him, but damn, thank God it's not my wife or my husband or whatever. And I have to deal with that. I have to deal with people trying to be nice to me when I really don't want people to be nice. I don't want you to touch me. I don't want anything. I just want to be. I remember in church sitting down and this lady put a hand on me and I could just hear Donna saying,
So
s- yeah, just let her put her hand on you and just, because I was to the point where it was like, I could feel the calm come over, just like, I know exactly what you would say to me. So let me just, because everybody was so awful. The people at the church were unbelievable. They just wanted to be there for me to make sure I was okay. It was just, it was just incredible. One little anecdote. Joanne's school, she was going to a Christian school and the principal and his wife came over and we were there and, they met you or whatever. And the principal said, "You look so much like your mother to you." And she said, the thing is, it's like people don't know what to say or, and it's like, you just, we laughed about it afterwards, but it was like,
Yeah.
people are so, I mean, it was such a time in this country where we've never seen a time like that. And I think things have gotten considerably worse since then.
Yeah.
But everybody was focused on healing the people who were hurt. And it was wonderful. It was also painful to have people know that you're hurting.
Yeah. And listening to what you were just saying about people pitying, right, and feeling sad, sorry for you. I specifically pushed back against that. Like, to your point about like how lucky we were to have her for that
Mhm.
amount of time. I never felt like, yes, it sucked that she was gone, right? Like that is undisputable.
Yeah.
But I in my mind, I'm like, you could have 100 years with somebody else and it never be the quality, the value, the love that we had in the 20 years we had. So when people say like they were like, I'm so sorry, I kind of like bristled because I was like, yes, I honor the fact that you were trying to connect, right? But that don't feel sorry for me because I had the most amazing mother.
Yes, yes, you will never, you
Yes,
will never know the kind of love that
right.
we had.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I mean, I tell people it's just like, you just don't understand. And people talk about mommy,
Mm,
and I don't get to talk about her a lot now, obviously, because it's over 20 years and a lot of people don't ask me about her.
mm,
But when I tell people about her, I had to be very careful because I started to hear myself and I was like, wait a minute, am I talking about a real person here? Because if you hear people talk about her and it's like, who was this lady? Who was this lady? I mean, she was just incredible. And you don't know whether they actually believe you or they think, well, they just full of it because their mother's gone and they're trying to, but
yeah.
she was just an incredible human being.
Whether or not they believe it or not, it mommy was everything. Last year when I read names at the September 11th memorial at the Ground Zero, and I wore a shirt that said my mom was everything. And and I remember talking to somebody after I got off of the dais, and she was like, "Oh, that's such a beautiful shirt." And I was like, "You have no idea. This is like I love a statement t-shirt. Like I wear statement t-shirts all the time." But it was like, you cannot understand how fantastic she was. And I'm sure people say that about their mother, and it's true, right? It's everybody's true, but she this I've never heard anybody say a bad word about her. And again, truly, no one's probably gonna say a bad thing about her to me, but in that sense, still, in all of the different circles and spheres that she was in, people only said just how wonderful she was.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you, and one of the reasons why it's been so I've taken it upon as like my sort of like keeping her legacy alive is something that is very, very important to me.
Yeah.
And for all of you who are listening, there is a page on my website, paulaedgar.com, and it says, when you go to About Me, there's a place it talks about my mother, Joan Donna Griffith. And I encourage you all to go there to learn more about who she was. But this conversation is going to give you more than that page will. And it's really why I wanted to have it, because you're hearing her impact. And
Mhm.
I have a question here about her legacy, but I'm like, I don't have to ask that question because you are hearing her
Yes.
legacy,
Yes.
and in in her spouse, in her children, in her grandchildren, in her extended family,
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
in
You talk about the nieces and nephews. I mean, it's a big her legacy is in each and every one of them. She was just incredible.
yeah,
Is there's still a huge hole in this family that can never be filled. But I must tell you that the position that you're in as being one of the leaders of this family, being my consigliere, this is the reason why you you educate your kids and you pour into them. This is the reason why my mother was a maid, you know, so that I could be, so that you could be, so that TJ could be, so that Austin could be, so that Joanne could be, so that Kaden could be, so that there's a foundation. So when you step on stage, you are not going alone because mommy is there with you. My mother's there with you. Grandpa's there with you. Your old buddy from the White Castle days. You know, the people who are going to remain nameless in my family. Those people are all there, and the future the future is bright because of mommy. You know, the future is bright because of the love that we shared. And when I say shared, we and I'm just including this, we went on vacations and took two other kids with us. Lee and Vicky always went on vacation with us because that was who she was. She wanted the people to experience things that she did, and I think it was all for the good.
yes. I often, when I'm speaking to audiences, is I will share something that she said to me a few times, which was, I had the choice. You could be the wind or you could be the leaf.
Hmm.
And that was, how are you going to shape where you're going to be? And she was such an important part of who I am. And I always tell people, I'm like, if you know me, you know her, because so much of who I am is because of who she was. And to kind of pull the circle and close it, in taking my child to college at Spelman, yay, they had a closing ceremony where you are supposed to give your kids to the school and trust them. And it was something that the priest or the pastor who was speaking, she said that this moment is something your ancestors have dreamed of. And I burst into tears because I think of all the people you just mentioned, but I specifically thought about this child who I named after myself and my mother. She is a culmination of who we were and what we poured into. And so you all know who my mother is because you have heard about the story and the things and how she added value. But you will continue to know who she is because we will continue to pour the values and the lessons and the fun that she made sure to prioritize into subsequent generations.
Yes.
And they will watch this and they will listen and they will hear and know about these things because it is important to remember that the victims in September 11th were not numbers. They were not, it was not a fraction, 1 out of 3,000
Yeah. Yeah.
people. And in particular, and I could not be me without speaking to the fact that not just that they were people, but that raising up the fact that they were Black people in
Mm.
that were victims, and they were Black executives who were also killed, like my mother, and it's important to know that they existed and who they were, and that they were not just a number. When we think about it on that day, it's not just a day off or a day of service. It's a day of remembering exactly what the world lost, but what the world had. And so, Daddy, I'm so happy that we had a chance to have this conversation. And you know that I always say that I'm a chip off the old block, and I love you very much. And I'm so happy that we were able to talk about mommy. And for all of you who are listening, remember to go and look on the website to learn a little bit more about mommy, to share this with other people who you think would be helpful to hear about her and her legacy and her impact. And that's all. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.
Love you.
Thanks for listening to the Brandy Ramoni podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to hit subscribe to get future episodes.